So first thing we're gonna do is, I think I've got it up there. Is there a song next? Okay. So first thing I want to do is, today we're talking about baggage and the things that we carry in our life and things like that. And the life that God has meant for us was never to carry baggage, never. So we have a little song I'm gonna start with, and you can sing along if you want. If you just want to sit and enjoy it, you can. It's got the words up. But it's kind of one of those things that inspired this talk today, was baggage and how we can live baggage-free. So Andrea, if you want to play that for me.
How can you move when they're weighing down? What can you do when you're tied to the ground? Yeah, you carry your burdens heavy like gravity. Just let them go now. There's freedom and liberty. Be careful when you hold your suitcases into your deck. Don't wait on the steps and open up your heart. Lay down your card. You don't have to be afraid. Just breathe and look and be lifted. There's a better way when you know you're forgiven. Open up your heart. Lay down your card. You don't have to be afraid. Can you imagine what it's like to be free? Oh, well, send the bags packing. They are now what you need. Oh, abandon your troubles by the side of the street. Just let them go now.
So that's kind of the song. It's an older song, but it's a song that I love. And every day it's kind of one of those reminders of, I don't have to carry around a big giant baggage with me all day long. So today we're talking in 1 Samuel. We're going to start our little slides here. And we're we're in the Old Testament. So we're setting kind of the groundwork for the kingdom of Israel. So at this point in time, Israel has no king. God has set them free from the Pharaoh, and God is now kind of the spiritual king over the realm of Israel. So that's kind of where we're starting at. So taking back a little bit, the first time I came to Scotland, I had to sit in quarantine for 14 days by myself. And all I had was 11 channels on my TV. So I watched the same shows over and over and over for those first 14 days. And one of the shows that I found was a show called Nothing to Declare. And if you haven't seen the show, it's an older show, but essentially it's a show that shows people when they're traveling, the things that they try and bring into different countries with them. And some of those things are illegal things, some of those are legal things. But the best part of this show is you have to fill out a little declaration card that says what your baggage contains. And some people are really good at this. Some people are like, yes, I brought food with me. Yes, I have drugs on me. Things like that. I mean, they make it easy. And some people just sit there and go, I brought nothing. And they sign at the bottom saying, I brought nothing with me. And those are the ones that usually end up causing an issue. So one of my favorite episodes that I watched was a husband and his wife. And his husband's a businessman. He's traveled a lot. This is the wife's first time out of the country. And so they come into customs, and the husband has filled out their forms that, no, we didn't bring anything we're not supposed to have. Like, our bags are just our clothing, things like that. And so they open up his suitcase at customs, and they find nothing, just clothes, normal stuff. And they go and they open up her suitcase. And the entire thing is filled with food. Raw meat, vegetables, fish, all sorts of weird plants and vegetables. Literally everything on the do not bring in list is in her bag. And the husband stands there and he's just like, oh no. And the wife has no idea what she's done wrong. And they ask him, they're like, why didn't you declare it on the card that you were bringing in food? And he's like, I didn't know. She packed her own bag. I didn't know she was bringing food. And he asked her, why did you bring food? And she's like, well, I packed. Since we were going to be away, I packed what I thought we needed to bring. And so it turns out that the agent, thankfully, is very generous with them and only gives them a warning, takes away their food, and goes, all right, next time, don't do this. And so it kind of made me think about the baggage that we carry. And if we were asked to fill out a declaration card on the baggage in our life, would we be truthful about the things in our baggage? If we had to show somebody our baggage, would they open it and go, eh? Or would they open it and go, oh goodness? And how honest are we about that baggage? So just a little thought there. So essentially, if you go to the next slide, Andrea, there's 3 types of personal baggage that we all carry around. And we've got physical baggage, emotional, and spiritual. And so obviously your physical is pain, bondage, addiction, health, your debt, your family. Those things are your physical baggage that you're carrying with you. So you're always having to think about those physical things in your life. And then you have your emotional baggage, which is your fear, sadness, anxiety, depression, worthiness. All those things go in your emotional baggage. So you're also carrying all of that with you as well. And then you've got spiritual baggage, which can be doubt, unforgiveness, sin, demonic stuff. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff that comes with spiritual. But these are all the baggage you're carrying around with you on a daily basis. Whether or not we want to admit it, and whether or not we want to own that we have it, it's all stuff that we face every single day. All of us carry it around. And so we're all talking about baggage today, obviously. So we're going to look at 2 people who had some serious baggage issues. And we're going to look at how they handled that baggage. So like I said, we're in the early days of Israel, in the kingdom of Israel. And the people of Israel have kind of been up and down with little wars and stuff like that. And they're kind of struggling. And the people of Israel are being led by priests and prophets. So those who talk to God are leading the country. But they don't have a physical human king. So they kind of look around and see all the kingdoms around them and the places around them that have kings and rulers and stuff like that, and they're going, we want that. And so Samuel is kind of the one prophet that we're working with. He's kind of the head guy. And the people come to him and go, Samuel, you're great, God's great, but we really want a king. And Samuel goes, are you sure you want a king? And they're like, yeah, we want to be like the other countries. We want somebody to fight for us. We want a king. So Samuel goes to God and goes, they want a king. And he goes, okay, well, tell them everything that a king entails. So the first thing we're going to look at is what Samuel tells them. And the crazy thing is this lovely list of things that a king comes with. So right now they're completely free people. All they have is God telling them, here, follow my commandments. Otherwise, they're free to farm, things like that. You give a sacrifice, things like that. But otherwise, they're free. So Samuel comes to them and goes, are you sure you want a king? This is what it's going to look like. And he says, he will take your sons and make them serve with his chariots and horses. Some will be assigned to be commanders of thousands and commanders of 50s. Others will plow his ground and reap his harvest. Others will make weapons of war, equipment for his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. You will give him the best of your fields and vineyards. Olive groves will all go to him. Your male and female servants and the best of your cattle, your donkeys, everything he'll take for his own use. And then he'll take 1/10 of your flocks, and you'll become his slaves. And Samuel goes, are you sure you want that? Because right now you got freedom, and you're signing up to have this. And the people come to him and say, yeah, sounds like a great idea. We want that. So Samuel goes back to God and says, okay, they said they want it. What are we going to do? And Lord goes, okay. He goes, one day they're going to complain about this. One day they're going to come back and go, hold on. This is not what I wanted. And he's like, and when that day comes, I'm going to ignore him. I'm going to kind of walk away and go, I told you so. But let's see what happens. So Samuel goes kind of on this search for a king. And he's walking about and he's doing his daily tasks. So now we kind of enter into the picture. We have Saul, who enters into the picture now. Now Saul is son of a wealthy man, has brothers and sisters and all sorts of different things. He's a very tall, handsome man. Literally, they call him a literal giant among men. His head's taller than everybody else. He's very strong, he's humble, things like that. And one day his dad loses a bunch of donkeys. And he sends Saul and his son out to find these donkeys. So they go out, they're traveling for days and days and days trying to find these donkeys. And they come to this town, it's several days later, and they still haven't found the donkeys. And Saul goes, let's go home. And the servant says, hold on. We're in this town, and I know that there's a man of God in this town, a prophet. And this prophet may be able to tell us where our donkeys are. And he goes, so let's go talk to him. And Saul goes, well, we don't really have any money. We don't have anything to offer him. Let's just go talk to him and see what happens. So they go into town and they meet Samuel, this man of God, this seer, this prophet. And they ask him, hey, have you seen our donkeys? And Samuel hears from God, this one. This is the one that will be king. So Samuel already hears this, okay, well, I guess I better talk to this guy, because he has no idea that he's going to be the first king of Israel. He comes from nothing. He walks in looking for donkeys. And when he leaves this town, he's going to be the king of Israel. So Samuel goes, I better talk to him. So, because I don't know about you guys, but if I walked in and somebody told me I was going to be queen, I'd be like, that's great. Do you know where I came from? Do you know what things I've got in my history? Do you know what baggage I've got? Because I got a lot of things going on, and you're asking me to be something very important. So Samuel comes in and he sits down with him, and he tells Saul, he says, He says, send your servant home. This will just be a conversation between the two of us. And Samuel does that, so he sends his servant home. And they have this conversation. And Samuel says to Saul, he goes, do you know you're going to be the head of Israel? And the funny thing is Saul's response to this. And I think this is kind of a response that we would all have. But Samuel says, as the donkeys you've lost 3 days ago, don't worry about them. They're home. And to whom is all the desire of Israel turned, if not to you and your whole family line? So what he's saying is essentially, your donkeys aren't important. Now, the whole of Israel is looking to you and your safe return. So he's like, okay, he goes, but Saul's response is, but I'm from the clan of Benjamin. I'm a Benjamite. And at this point, the tribe of Benjamin is tiny. It's been decimated. It's tiny. There's hardly anybody left. And Saul goes, are you sure you want somebody from the tribe of Benjamin? Are you sure it's me? And he goes, why are you saying this to me? And Samuel says, okay, if you don't believe me, that's fine. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you home. And there's going to be a couple things that you'll see along the way. And so he prophesies all these things that are going to happen to Saul on his way home. And as Saul goes home, all of these things happen to him. So he anoints Saul, covers his head in oil, and says, you will be king of Israel. God has claimed it. You'll be king of Israel. So he returns home to see all of his family. Yes, as we have here. He goes, you'll reign over the people of the Lord and save them from the hand of their enemies. And this shall be the sign to you. So when God comes upon you, you're going to feel that Holy Spirit. And that's going to be your sign to know that this has happened. So on his way home, obviously he goes through, he has all these things happen. And the Spirit of God comes on him and he realizes, oh no, I'm going to be king. And the funny thing is when he gets home, his uncle stops him and goes, the servant came back a little while ago. Where have you been? Like, what you been doing? And Saul says, well, we were looking for the donkeys, and they said they came home, so we just came home. And his uncle's like, oh, nothing else happened? No, nothing else happened. So Saul decides to keep this secret of his kingship, which if I were me, I'd come home and be like, the Lord has told me I will be queen. Let me tell everybody. I'm going to tell my entire family. Everybody will know I've been chosen. I am the chosen one. I'm going to tell everybody I know. But Saul doesn't do that. Saul hides that little information away and he tucks it away. So it comes a day that Samuel comes and he calls all the tribes together. And he says, come here. We got to do some talking. And he pulls all the tribes in, and he kind of goes through each one of them. He says, you've been asking for a king. I'm going to give you a king. And he says, all right. So he calls all the tribes. They all come up, and he goes, okay, the tribe of Benjamin. And they're like, all right, where's Saul? And nobody knows where Saul is. And so what they find out is Saul is hiding. And they all look around. They can't find him. And what they find is the next. I think it's on here, Andrea. I'm not sure if there's a next verse. Is there a next one? A next slide? I think. Nope. Okay. Never mind. So what it says is that he goes, the Lord has said he is here, but he has hidden himself among the supplies. So if you look at, he's hidden himself among the supplies. All the tribes of Israel have come. They've brought food, they've bought clothes, they've brought tents, they've brought animals, everything like that with them. And there's hundreds of them. And they're all packed in this little area. And Saul, this big, tall, strong man, has hidden himself away. And he says, go and bring him to me. Go and find him and bring him to me. And so all the people go out looking for Saul, and they find him, and what it says is they bring him out. Now, when they bring him out, they didn't just come on, they drug him like kicking and screaming like a little kid to the front. Just they drug him out of his hiding spot to this place of honor. So the first thing we're looking at is literally physical baggage. So Saul has physical baggage, and he's hidden it, and he's hidden himself in it. Now, if we look at things in our life, we have a lot of physical baggage that I think we can find ourselves hiding things from. If we're called to do something, it's really easy to go, well, sorry, I got family, I can't do that. Sorry, I have a house to pay for, I have a car to pay for, and I can't do that. Or, I would welcome somebody into my house, but my guest room has a really cool train set in it, and I don't want to take that down. So it's really easy for us to hide from God's calling with physical stuff. And so our physical baggage can be an extreme barrier. So we see Saul, and the first thing he has is his physical baggage, that he's now going, I've heard the call. The Spirit has come upon me. Jesus told me I'm going to be king, and I'm not feeling it. So I'm going to hide myself in my physical baggage. And the thing is, it doesn't work, because none of this works with God. And so he becomes king, and everybody's all excited. Saul's going to become king. So now we've got this great king who's coming, and he's got all this physical baggage, and he's got emotional and spiritual baggage, I'm sure, from his life before, that's coming with him. And so they appoint him king, and he goes with it. And the funny thing is that Saul continues to hide with his stuff the whole time. He continues to cling to his baggage. And he also likes to take things into his own hands. There's so many times in our lives where we sit there and go, I have a lot of anxiety, but I'm going to deal with it. I've got this, but I'm going to deal with it. I don't need anybody else's help. I surely don't need God's help. I'm going to manage it, and it'll be just fine. And that's what Saul tries to do. So if you look at the rest of Saul's life, he's kind of poor. He surrounds himself with the worst people, scoundrels, people who try and take money from him, give him wrong information, and he continues to make choices that glorify himself over God. And in fact, there's one battle where he comes in and he says, oh, well, I did something wrong. Can we take the credit a little bit? So if you'll go to the next slide, and I think it's on this next one. Yeah. So Saul is sent out for this battle, and God tells him essentially to slaughter everything and come back with nothing. And Saul goes, I slaughtered the people, but I brought home some gold and some cows, but I was going to use it for God's sacrifice. It's all right. And Samuel goes, no, that's not all right. You were supposed to kill everything. Nothing was supposed to come out of this. And Saul goes, oh, well, oops. I guess God forgive me. And this is what he responds with. He said, I have sinned, yet honor me now before the elders of my people and before Israel, and return with me that I may bow before the Lord your God. So there's a couple things in here that I want us to look at. It says, yeah, I've sinned, but honor me. So when was the last time we said, oh, I did something God didn't want me to do, but I want you all to say thank you to me for doing it. I've done it. I brought us a whole bunch of gold and cows, and I've made our lives better. So thank you very much. And then the second part is bow before the Lord your God. Now I want you to think about this, because the next king that we're going to talk about phrases this very differently. And he says, bow before the Lord your God. So he's saying, we're going to bow before your God. He's not saying I'm going to bow before my God. He's been appointed by the Lord, and yet he's saying, this is not my Lord. So you have kind of this downfall of Saul, where he turns from, ultimately the first time off, he's a humble guy. He's like, okay, I guess I'm king. And he starts off trying to do all the right things. And he's managing the best he can with his human hands. And each time he fails, he does this same thing. He's like, sorry, God, forgive me. I tried to do it on my own. But there's a point when God gets tired of it. And God tells him, he's like, I'm sorry, but you can't do this anymore. I'm done with you trying to run your own show. I put you in place. I gave you this field. And you're not following what I've told you to do. And I'm done. It's like giving a toddler the count to 3. 1 mistake, 2 mistakes, 3 mistakes. You're done. And so this begins kind of the downfall of Saul and his kind of rule out. And so you see, he doesn't handle running things himself very well. He sits there and goes, oh, well, I did this, and I can manage this. It's like herding cats. Literally, like, I love that phrase. That in my head, when I think of herding cats, it's just a very entertaining phrase. Because I'm like, oh, okay, so you get one in, and you're just by yourself, just like, okay, let's bring them all in, and one runs off. And it's really hard to do when you're just one person. But the thing is, if we ask somebody else to help us, it becomes a little easier. And then if we ask somebody else, it becomes a little easier. And the funny thing is that Saul never gets that. Throughout his whole reign as king, he never gets that. He just goes, I'm going to manage it. It's all my thing. I am the king. And he takes this stance. And so he loses favor with God. And God goes, I'm done with him. We're going to find a new king. We're finding a new king. And so I think, let's see here. I lost my place now. Tink. I love when that happens. So now we're going to look at the new coming in is King David. Now we all kind of hear about David. If you haven't, he's the only David in the Bible. So we hear about King David, and he has a completely different commentary on his baggage than Saul does. And so we're going to start out looking at the very beginning of David, where he comes from, and we're going to see how he deals with his baggage. So David, who is going to be the second king of Israel, comes into the scene when Saul is still king. So Saul is still running things, albeit very poorly. He's still running things. And David comes from the tribe of Judah, which is another tribe, and he's got 7 older siblings. Now, I don't know about many of us, if we have 7 older siblings, usually the youngest kind of gets the brunt of everything. I mean, sometimes, you get the youngest that's a little spoiled. But usually, when you've got 7 older, especially brothers, you're kind of tormented. So I can imagine David, as a young man, already has a whole lot of emotional baggage. Things that his brothers have tried to do with him, things that his family's tried to do with them. He's the one, his brothers are off doing great things with Saul's army, and David's stuck at home watching the sheep. And so Jesse, who is David's father, has his 3 oldest sons are out fighting on the battlefield with the Philistines. And he goes, hey, David, I want you to take all these supplies, leave the sheep, go take all the supplies, find out how your brothers are doing. And he goes, okay. So David, not questioning this, finds somebody to watch the sheep, takes all the supplies, and goes to the battlefield. And the funny thing is, when we arrive at the battlefield, something happens. Now, we enter into the story now where we go into David and Goliath. And I think we've all heard the story of David and Goliath. As David comes in as this young man to fight this giant with a sling and a rock. And I just find the interesting, we've all heard that story so many times, but I like the parts that go around it. And when you look at it, we have this thing that happens. So before all this kind of comes into place, Samuel had gone. So Samuel's still the prophet and priest, And he's still on God's aim to find himself a new king. So he's been out kind of doing his thing, visiting all the tribes, things like that. And he comes to the tribe of Judah. And this is when David is a young boy. And he meets David. And he meets all the other sons of Jesse's. And he goes, "Where's your other son?" And Jesse goes, "Well, he's out with the sheep." And he goes, "Bring him in here. I want to meet him." And so they bring in the youngest, and the Lord tells Samuel, "This is the next king." And so I want you to put yourself in the shoes of David at this point. Again, I've already said he's already got 7 older siblings. So, and in this time, when you have older siblings, those siblings come first. So in any gifts that are given, your older siblings get all of it first, and then kind of whatever the last would come to you. So I want you to see where David's perspective is with his family. And how we have his older siblings, who are all probably pretty ticked off at David, because they too met Samuel. And Samuel went, "Hold on, y'all are nice to meet. I like you, but where's the other one? I want to meet him." And then as soon as he meets him, he goes, "You're it." So he's the youngest. It's just this place where it comes in, we all have this, he's got this baggage. I mean, I honestly can't imagine coming as a young boy and having me like, "Oh yeah, you're going to be the next king, let me anoint you." And my older siblings going, "Really? Like, we're the oldest. We were supposed to get this. What? Oh, so you're choosing his line to go off of. What about us?" So you kind of have to imagine that David's coming in with this baggage. He's coming in and he's doing this. And so when his dad sends him out to the battlefield to go check on his brothers, I can imagine him getting out there, and his brothers are kind of like, "What are you doing here?" And the funny thing is the fact is that they do say that. He comes out and they're like, "What are you doing here? Are you here to take all the glory? We're here fighting this battle. What are you doing here?" And so if we go into the story of, I'm not following the slides at all, Andrea. I apologize. The slides are just kind of like, there are other things right now. So let's see here. And I've lost my place once again. Love it. Okay. All right. So I'm back on my place now. So David shows up on the battlefield here. So another part that we have to think about here, see there, I had it up here the whole time, is David has been working for Saul before this. So when God called his favor off of Saul, he removed his spirit from Saul. And then, because Saul had been so poor, he went, "Saul, I'm going to send somebody to torment you because you haven't listened to a word I have to say. And I'm going to make your life miserable for all intents and purposes." And so in his dismay, Saul sends for somebody to come help him and to comfort him and to sing to him. So these demons, his spiritual baggage, doesn't bother him quite as much. And who do you think that ends up being? David. So David ends up coming in and working for Saul. And he's like, "I am now the one who has the favor bestowed upon me. God has given me his spirit. I am coming the next king. And here I am singing to the old king. So his spiritual baggage doesn't seem so heavy." So David already knows Saul. And Saul knows David. And they come in. Let's see how I got time. Yeah. So Saul comes in, and David comes into the picture. And this is where we get into the actual story of David and Goliath. And up here, on here, you can see again where he goes up, and he's taking the stuff to his brothers. And take them a token from me. And so David got up early, left with the sheep, and the thing is, he left the sheep with a keeper. So he's got physical baggage of sheep. And what he did was he found somebody to take care of the sheep. So he's free to move forward. So then, Andrew, if you want to go to the next one. So David comes to the encampment, and he finds out there's a big battle getting ready to start. And so he goes, and he hears all this stuff going on, and he's like, I got all this baggage, what do I do with it? Now, David could have easily sat there and been like, okay, I got all this baggage, I'll just take it with me and find out what's going on. But he doesn't. He leaves the baggage in the charge of the keeper of the baggage. So David comes in, dumps his baggage with the guy who's supposed to be in charge of it, and runs off to the battlefield, to where he's supposed to be. And so, again, we see now, if you're catching on, David is already managing his baggage better than Saul did. So David's coming in and going, I know where I'm supposed to be. I feel like God's calling me to go here. Yet I got sheep to take care of it. Get rid of them. I got all this baggage, give it to somebody else. So I can go off and do this. And so, again, he arrives at the battlefield and he hears Goliath calling out to the people of Israel and saying, come out here, come send this. Come send me somebody who will fight me. And of course David goes, all right, I'm tired of hearing this. I'm going to go out and do it. And he goes to talk to his brothers about it. And his brothers are like, again, you're here to steal our glory. What are you doing here? You're supposed to be back with the sheep. Where are the sheep at? What'd you do with them? He's like, it's all right. I left them with somebody. I brought you some food, but I left that to the guy who's in charge of food too. And I'm here. I want to do this. I feel like God's calling me to do this. And they laugh at him. His brothers laugh at him. So he goes to talk to somebody else about it. And that person says, you know what? I think you should go talk to Saul. And so David now goes to the king and says, hey, Saul, I want to go take on Goliath. And Saul kind of does the same thing. He's like, are you sure? You sure you want to do that? He goes, yeah, God's telling me. There's somebody challenging the army of the living God. And I don't like that. So Saul goes, okay, here, take some armor, take some stuff, and go challenge him. And then we find out, we know that obviously the armor doesn't fit David, nothing fits David. So he goes to the river, picks up a couple stones in his sling, and goes out into the battlefield. Now, there's nothing in here that says David set up a will, last living will and testament, got all of his affairs in order, told this is where my belongings will go. He left his sheep, left his baggage, and when God's telling me to go do this, I'm going to go do this. Because they're coming against God. And so he runs to the battlefield. He runs out there. And he's doing it because God has called him to do it. And the amazing thing is, obviously we know the ending of this. We know that David kills Goliath with a stone. A stone. And at the end of this is where Saul starts to go, Because Saul's like, I sent him out there with nothing. Absolutely nothing. And yet God has given him favor. God's given him favor. And so we see this continuing thread with David, is that David relies on God. In everything. He relies on God. He's sitting there going, oh, there's this battle, they're challenging my belief in God. I gotta go fix it. And he could have said, oh, well, this armor doesn't fit me, Saul, I can't go out and do this now because I don't have anything to protect me. But he didn't. He went, okay, I'll go down the river, pick some stones, and God's with me, so I'm going to go out there and just see what happens. So we see this, and so we see that David never hides the fact that he has baggage. He shows it every time. He sits there and goes, oh, I got baggage. And as we look at David's life later on, I mean, we all kind of know, and if you don't, I recommend you look at the life of David. But ultimately, David is not a very good guy all the time. I mean, he lusts over a woman that lives on the roof atop across from him, calls her over, gets her pregnant, and then decides to have her husband killed. So he's a murderer. He's got anxiety. There's a point in his life where he fears leaving his palace. He has all this fear and anxiety. And he becomes kind of this dishonorable person. But the beautiful thing is, each time this thing happened, he laid it out for God. When after he goes through this whole thing of hiring somebody to kill Uriah, he comes and he's like, God, I messed up. And he goes, I need forgiveness. And when we look at how Saul asked for forgiveness, Saul went, yeah, I did wrong, but I'm still good. Like, I'm still good. Praise me. And David has a different turnaround. He goes, God, I've done wrong. I know I've done wrong. And everything in my life should be given to you. And so there's just a big difference between these first two kings that we see and how they handle the baggage in their lives. And I don't know about you guys, but when I travel, obviously I have my carry-on bag, because now you got to pay for them, but you got your carry-on bag, right, and your personal item. And then usually you've got a big bag that you travel with. It has all the rest of your stuff in it. And when you get to the airport, what do? Is you wheel it up to the counter, and you give your bag to somebody else. And they take that bag, and it goes to your final destination. Now, what if we had to take that bag throughout our whole journey? I mean, there's been times that I've had to run through airports, and with just a backpack on. I can't imagine what it would be like to have to run through that airport, dragging my bag along with me. And this last time I came over, I brought 2 bags that were 75 pounds. So I'd be dragging 180 pounds worth of baggage, physical baggage, behind me as I'm running down the concourse trying to catch a flight. And the thing is, we trust somebody to deal with our baggage right when we come in the door. So when we set in our baggage, they go, okay, it'll come to your final destination. Now we're going to ignore the fact that people are people and airlines lose baggage, because that happens. But we trust somebody to take it. And the question is, who do we give our baggage to in life? Who do we give our baggage to? Because we can either carry it with us and drag it through the airport on our daily life, every day just walking down the street, going to the shop, dragging your baggage. Or we can give our baggage to somebody who we know will take care of it. I want to go back and glimpse really quick at the part where David leaves his stuff with the stuff keeper. And the only stuff keeper I know in my life that will gladly take care of all the stuff I give him is God. Because he's the only one I know that isn't going to share that stuff with everybody else. He's not going to disperse it through everybody. He knows what's in the bag. He knows what's there. But he is the keeper of the stuff. So why would I carry my stuff into battle when I can give it to a keeper of stuff? Best place to put it. So Saul and David both did great things. They both did terrible things. But you look at who they gave their baggage to. Saul tried to run his kingdom with his baggage, carrying his baggage the whole way. And every time he fell, he blamed it on somebody else. But I still got my baggage. And when David became king, he ran But he gave his baggage to the one who keeps the stuff. So every time something came up in his life and he went, oh, I did that wrong, I made that mistake, instead of carrying around that mistake for the rest of his life, he's going to go, hey, God, I messed up. Could you take this for me? God goes, yeah, I'll take it. So David no longer has to care about his baggage. He doesn't have to worry about it anymore. And the thing is, David knew the faithfulness of God. He knew the faithfulness of God. And the funny thing is when he goes and he talks to Saul originally about wanting to go out and fight Goliath, Saul says to him, are you sure? You're like a scrawny kid. Are you sure you want to go out there? I don't know if you can. And David comes and he goes, well, I'm a shepherd. And as a shepherd, I had to fight off bears and lions. I had to wrestle them. I had to protect my sheep. I had to do all these different things. And that also becomes part of his story, his emotional and spiritual baggage, his physical baggage. He said to do this. I can't imagine fighting a lion or a bear. I think I'd be scared to death if I had to fight a lion or a bear. Yet he comes back and he remembers this. And the thing about when we give our baggage to a baggage keeper, it doesn't mean we forget about what the baggage has in it. We give it to him. He carries it, but we know what's in the baggage still. And this act that David says, he says, I've done this great thing, and this is how I know I can defeat Goliath. Because if I fought the bear and killed the bear, and I fought the lion and killed the lion, then I can do this, because I know I've done it before. And so he's remembering God's faithfulness throughout his life. God was there when he fought the lion and got him through. God was there when he fought the bear, and that got him through. So why would God not get him through this? God is not the one to let us down. We let ourselves down when we try and do it ourselves. But if we give our baggage to the one who keeps the baggage, we still know that what happened last time we got through, we can do it again. And that's just the beautiful thing. It's just this art of remembering. And I think there's so many times that we feel like with our baggage that we get those two mixed up. We feel that in order for us to remember the things that happen in our life, that we have to constantly keep them with us. That they have to be our physical burden to bear all the time. And that's not the case. Because God forgave us so we could move forward. He forgave us. Doesn't mean it didn't happen in our life. Doesn't mean these bad things don't happen. But we don't have to worry about them anymore. So my question for you this week is, what are you writing on your declaration card for your baggage? If you get stopped at customs, God opened your bag, are you going to sit there and say, oh, I didn't know I packed that? Ooh. Or are you going to own up to it and tell God, yeah, I messed up, I got some mistakes in there. I'm sure there's something illegal in there. And God's either going to go, thanks for telling me. Or God's going to go, I see you're hiding things again. Because God can either use our baggage for good, or we can just use it and try and use it for his good. He's got a purpose for everything that we go through. Every bit of baggage in our life, he's got a purpose for. So that's just my question this week as we go forward. What are you writing on your declaration card? Are you going to lie? Are you going to own up to it? Are you going to share your baggage with other people? Because that would be my question. If somebody today opened up your bag, what would you feel about it? Would you tell them what was in it? Would you not? Because I think there's a lot of times we feel like we're carrying a bag by ourselves. And that nobody else has the same baggage that we have. Nobody's got this. This is mine. You can't do this. And there's so many times in life where we meet people and we realize that they've they have the same baggage. But we wouldn't have known it had they not said anything. Had they not told us, oh, I've got that same baggage. So I just ask you, what are you writing on your declaration? And how are you going to use that baggage for somebody else's good? If you've given that baggage to the baggage keeper, are you going to help somebody else give up their baggage? Because it's a whole lot easier to go through our life and going, I gave my baggage away. Nice to see you struggling. But we can also sit there and go, hey, I know that baggage. Let me show you who to give it to. They'll keep it nice and safe. You can still work through it, but they'll keep it nice and safe. You don't have to carry it anymore. So we're going to sing kind of the last song, and then we'll do a prayer. And I just ask you, if you want to stand, you can. If you don't have to. But we're going to take a little song and pray and sing.